Seeing it's 6 p.m., I'd like to call the May 5th, 2021 regular meeting of the Kenai City Council to order. And if you are able, would you please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. Clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel.
Here.
Councilmember Askin.
Here.
Councilmember Glendenning.
Here.
Councilmember Nextet.
Here.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Here.
Councilmember Petty.
Here.
Councilmember Winger.
Here.
Mayor Gabriel, you have a quorum.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Council, before we get to agenda approval, I'd like to call attention to a laydown you should have in front of you with requested revisions to the agenda packet. Action, add item D5, ordinance number 3210-2021, postponement memo brought forth by the city manager, Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to approve the agenda with the requested revisions to the agenda and packet listed by the mayor, requesting unanimous consent.
Second.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the agenda is approved. Next up, we have the consent agenda. Councilmember Nextet.
Thank you. I move for approval of the consent agenda.
Second.
Is there any member of the body that would like to amend the consent agenda at this time?
From the body?
Yes.
Yes, I'd like to pull ordinance 3213-2021.
Which item is that? D, or on consent agenda?
Yeah, number 5, G5.
G5. Okay, so will that take that up in order then? Any other amendments to the consent agenda? Seeing none, clerk, would you please read the consent agenda into the record, please?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Tonight on your consent agenda, you have approving special meeting minutes of April 20th brought forth by the city clerk, approving regular meeting minutes of April 21st brought forth by the city clerk, approving special meeting minutes of April 22nd brought forth by the city clerk, and approval of the work session summary of April 24th brought forth by the city clerk, approval of bills to be ratified brought forth by administration, approval of a non-objection to the renewal of liquor licenses for Oaken Keg number 1808 and Kenai Joe's Tap House brought forth by the city clerk, introduction of ordinance number 3211-2021, adopting the annual budget for the fiscal year commencing July 1, 2021 and ending June 30, 2022, and committing $4,898,000 of general fund balance for future capital improvements brought forth by administration with a public hearing on May 19th. And introduction of ordinance 3212-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the airport fund, airfield, and administration departments for expenditures in excess of budgeted amounts related to additional temporary hours and overtime hours needed for winter snow removal activity, and leave cash-in amounts in excess of budgeted amounts caused by employee retirement, brought forth by administration with a public hearing on May 19th. And that is your consent agenda.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Is there anybody in the general public that would like to speak to any item that is on the consent agenda, which was just read into the record?
If you're on Zoom, you can raise your hand or unmute.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Was unanimous consent requested?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, the consent agenda is approved. Next up under item B, scheduled public comment, we have Peter Torkelson, Alaska Redistricting Board's upcoming map drawing cycle. And if there's no objection from the body, Mr. Torkelson has requested 15 minutes instead of 10.
Thank you.
Mr. Torkelson.
Thank you, council members, mayor. My name is Peter Torkelson. I'm the executive director of the Alaska Redistricting Board. You may know that every 10 years a census is conducted, and every 10 years I get older, and I went to KPC some years ago, and my teenagers now speak of it as if it were the dark ages. But in the 2020 census is now complete, and the census is crunching numbers. And so it's every 10 years, the Constitution requires us to redraw legislative districts. So I'm gonna just briefly run through some of that today. Slide 2, please. So you may recall that in 1998, Alaska voters amended the Constitution to create a redistricting board, a 5-member board. Each board member is appointed two by the governor, one by the Senate president, one by the House Speaker, and one by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. The purpose was to create some political distance. Previously, the governor had redrawn lines every 10 years. The Constitution requires that each of our members come from a different part of the state. So we have Fairbanks, Interior, Southeast, Nome, and Wasilla are represented in this year's board. And the board holds the sole responsibility for drawing new legislative districts each 10 years. Next slide, please. The current board members are John Binkley of Fairbanks, Melanie Banky of Nome, Nicole Barome of Anchorage, Bethany Markham of Wasilla, and Bud Simpson of Juneau. You may recall 10 years ago, your Senator Torgerson was chair of the district. So why change what works? I mean, people get comfortable with the status quo, but as we all know, people move. Next slide, please. Alaska enjoys a lot of movement, and yet our Constitution, both the U.S. and Alaska Constitutions, require that we come as close to one person, one vote as possible. And so as some areas lose population and others gain, districts which have fewer people, you gain more purchase, essentially, over your elected representatives. Next slide, please. Alaska features a lot of churn. Up until the last few years, we have about 40,000 people moving in and about 40,000 people moving out every year. Of course, this changes a lot depending on the part of the state you're in. In the Bethel area, for example, 88% of Alaskans were born there, and in the Aleutians borough, only 17%. Next slide, please. So you can see from this chart that Alaska has enjoyed a lot of growth over time. Next slide, please. By subtracting out-migration and immigration, we suddenly see the Korean War, we can see the pipeline, the oil boom, the oil bust, and so forth. And then during the U.S. recession in 2007, 8, 9, 10, Alaska gained population because our economy was doing quite well. Next slide, please. However, what we're looking at now is a dramatic shift from growth. Every 10 years, we've had 70, 80, 90, 100,000 people move to Alaska. In this cycle, we're looking at almost no growth. 15,000-ish people have moved to Alaska. We've net gained about 15,000 in the last decade. So this is a new experience for us. Normally, we're drawing dramatically different lines, and this time, we don't have to accommodate a lot of new people. It's going to be more movements within the state that we expect. Next slide, please. Of course, everyone wants to know, when are we going to get the census data? I wish I could answer that question. We are in dialogue with the Census Bureau. They email me from time to time, and we all want to know, but we don't know. What they've guaranteed us is you will have data by September 30th. They've subsequently been sued for that announcement, and we were notified just a few weeks ago that we will now potentially see data as soon as August 16th. That still may be under flux. There's a case in Alabama, and it's being debated as we speak. Next slide, please. Regardless of when we get the data, our Constitution is crystal clear. Within 30 days of receiving the data, the board must adopt one or more proposed districting plans. Last time, the board adopted 4 different plans, 3 of which were offered by other parties, other groups that had formed. And then within 90 days, the board must adopt one plan, one new redistricting plan. And between that, the 60-day window, the board will be doing what we call a roadshow, going around the state with the proposed plans and the maps. We'll hang them on the wall and let folks come and tell us what they think, express concerns about where this map puts the line here or there, so you should have ample opportunity to engage in that process. Next slide, please. In a normal timeline, last time the board received the data on March 15th. Well, that was a month and a half ago. So that would generally mean that we would have a plan by June 13th. So that would be very soon. And then candidates who might want to run would have a year to think about, do I want to do this? And people who might sue would have nearly a full year to take their case to the courts and try and come to resolution before anyone had to run for office. Next slide, please. However, because of the delay, and I mentioned this briefly, we're looking at a completely different timeline this time. funny, on March 15th, the census recently determined they could move up their data to mid-August after being sued. So it's clearly in flux. Next slide, please. If we get the data as soon as August 24th, this is just a hypothetical, we do not know, then the deadline for a plan adoption would be November 22nd. And the deadline for litigation, the Constitution allows a 30-day window after the board adopts a plan. Any group that wishes to sue over the plan has 30 days to do so. That means that by the end of December, that would be the deadline for litigation filing. Gives about a 5-month litigation window before candidates have to file for office June 1st of 2022. Next slide, please. If we get the data September 30th, which is the drop dead deadline they've given us, we're looking at a final plan adopted between Christmas and New Year's on December 29th. We're super excited about that possibility. Right, that would leave only a 4-month litigation window before candidates would have to file. We're aware of this. This is a problem. It's a problem for anyone who wants to run for office. We know that. There's nothing we can do. The Constitution's deadlines are clear. The Census Bureau doesn't take the orders from us. We're going to do our best and hopefully draw a plan that doesn't draw significant lawsuits so candidates will have some clarity. That's our holy grail. Next slide, please. I would point out, though, that we're probably looking at a very compressed litigation window, probably just 4 months, and we really don't know what to expect out of that. You may recall in the last cycle, the courts adopted an interim plan for 2012, which was then subsequently amended in the following 2013, the 14 cycle was even different. Again, you may recall that Moose Pass was South Anchorage District in that first 12 plan, and then that got changed subsequent. So that actually did impact the Kenai Borough. All right, next slide, please. This is a draft timeline, and go ahead and hit the next slide. I'll zoom in a little bit. Once we get the data, the clock is ticking, and this is roughly what we expect to happen in terms of a timeline. You'll notice that there's public testimony and hearings shown. Pretty soon after we get the data, we'll start hearing from the public. We expect third-party groups, again, to submit plans. We're in dialogue with a couple of them already, so we expect that to occur. Next slide, please. Then we'll be into essentially a roadshow where we split the board up into small groups to cover as much territory as possible. Last time they went to about 30 communities. We certainly hope to get somewhere close to that this time, although who knows when new COVID restrictions may be forthcoming. We just can't predict that. The board has yet to actually meet in person. I've never actually met these people, which is sort of funny, but it's the way it is. Then the final plan must be adopted by day 90. Last cycle, they adopted it on day 87. So next slide, please. This cycle's unique, as we all know. Alaska has grown. In 2000, we had 15,000 people, 700 per district. The target this time, we just got this data on April 30th, brand new, fresh from the census. The actual Alaska population is 733,391. Well, that's what they say it is, and that's gospel for us. We can't question that. That means the target district size is 18,355 people per legislative district for this coming cycle. That's the target. So that's new information. Next slide, please. We set up a website, went live a couple months ago. There's all kinds of ways to get involved. Next slide, please. You can sign up for our essentially e-news. I email out anytime there's new news. Next slide, please. It's a simple form. I've left some business cards by the agendas that have a little QR code on the back. You can zap with your phone and go right there and fill it out, and you'll get an email from us anytime something develops. So when I hear something from the census, I'll let you know that something's changing. Next slide, please. Of course, redistricting is all about maps. The current maps are there for your review. You can click them, download them, high-res, print them out. When new maps are adopted by the board, even proposed maps, they'll be on the website. You can click on them, make comments, and tell us what you think about any particular map. Next slide, please. There's also a little side menu. Next slide, please. And if you'd like, next slide, please. You can request a meeting. If you see maps come out and you'd like to hear from us again, let us know, and we'll try and accommodate that to the degree we can. Next slide, please. That's it. Thank you very much for your time. I know you have a full agenda tonight. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
It's fascinating. Councilmember Glenn Denning.
Yes. How does the census affect municipal elections? In other words, there's a certain amount of people ascribed to the Kenai Peninsula Borough, and then we have assembly districts, and we have municipal considerations. Whose responsibility is it to assign district sizes to a specific population? Is that a function of the borough assembly to do that?
Yeah. Yes, sir. I believe the local borough or city, depending on if you're
Okay.
incorporated, would have authority. We do not have, for example, in Anchorage, we don't have any say over assembly districts in Anchorage.
So you just say there's X amount of people in this borough and deal with it.
And that, yeah, they assign it how they wish.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Petty.
You indicated that the board makes their plan and that third parties could also create a plan. Does the board look at those third-party plans with critical eye?
What happened last time was third-party plans helped to highlight areas of consensus between different interest groups. So people would bring maps forward and, oh, look, all three of these different groups who are at odds over other parts agree on these certain lines. And so that actually was very helpful to the board. And they ended up using a number of third-party lines that were brought forward because they kept showing up on everyone's maps. Like, that's a good idea. However, in the end, the board has to weigh all the competing interests and come up with its own plan, which is a combination of those. And then we also have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, federal legislation, which can impacts how states can redraw lines with regards to minority voting strength. So this goes way back to the Civil Rights Movement. It applies to Alaska. So in addition to Alaska's Constitution, which requires that we draw compact and continuous districts that respect socioeconomic boundaries, we also have to comply with the Voting Rights Act, which prevents us from diluting minority voting strength or legislative representative strength. So that's another factor that is in the board's decision.
Any further questions of Mr. Torkelson? Thank you very much. That was very good. So I guess I do have one last question. So once you come up with the map, once you come up with the final draft, are you going to be planning to visit us at any time in the future?
Well, I
Was
would
there-
expect that we would pay several visits to the Kenai Peninsula during the roadshow when there's multiple plans on the table.
Okay.
So that you guys can weigh in before a final decision is made.
Okay.
And then, once a final decision is made, then it's just down to litigation.
Gotcha.
It's disagreement.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up, we have item C, unscheduled public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? Ms. Nelson.
Hi, Marion Nelson, 44629 Tower Hills Street in Ridgeway, a couple of 100 feet beyond the Kenai city limits, as I say. So I'm here, once again, president of the Art Guild in the Art Center. We're in the process of officially changing the name to Kenai Arts Center, and that's, as if you've been through that and you've been involved in a nonprofit or business or whatever, you know what a pain in the butt that is, because that means changing the checks, all of those details. It'll be a while before it's officially in all the corners that it needs to get into, but we've started that process. Anyway, that's kind of a detail. Excuse me. As most of you know, we've been redoing the very back portion of the Art Center, which is an old building built in the 50s, mostly by volunteers. So we knew there would be some surprises, and fortunately there hasn't been many. There's one that's just over one of the windows, but really not such a big deal. Scott Curtin, your good city employee, is taking care of that in fine order. What I'm here maybe specifically tonight is to invite you all to the opening, because we are planning to open and will open July 1st, which is our usual first Thursday show opening date, and asking the mayor or the vice mayor, whoever's available, to say a few kind words about our relationship and that it is a city building and so forth and so on. You guys know what to say about that. It'll be at 6 o'clock. And the show that month, we've had to, of course, post all kinds of art shows, and this is one that was scheduled for this year, but not, well, I guess it is this month. But anyway, there's been quite a number of, excuse me, show changes. This is one that is in place, so it'd be the Potter's Guild show. And that's always popular. People love pottery, and everybody likes it. Everybody buys it. So it's a win-win all the way around. We look forward to finally being able to open the gallery. It'll be repainted. We're repainting the interior of the whole building, or very nearly so anyway. Actually, here's a little surprise that was uncovered recently as the contractor peeled away some of the sheetrock and so forth. It's right next to the jail, and then if you don't know there's a jail in the back, then you need to know that and come and see it. Immediately next to it, there's a panel of wall space that's about so wide, a couple feet at the most, and here are measurements for height, and starting at 5, maybe 4 feet, and going on up to whatever it is. So there's no other reason for that to be there other than to get a photograph of whoever's going to go in that jail next to those numbers. So that's been there a long time. We had no idea, of course, that it was there. It was kind of a fun surprise this last week, speaking of surprises. We're going to keep that. We're going to make sure that that shows into the future. And we do have some very fun things planned for the future. Excuse me. With a jail theme. I won't go into all of that until it becomes a reality, but you can count on there being some black and white striped themed things in some of our print material, maybe during the harvest auction in the fall, which we certainly plan to hold, and so forth and so on. So anyway, inviting you all to July 1st to that opening of the Arts Center once again, and the Potter's Guild show. So any questions for me?
Any questions of Ms. Nelson?
Come on,
Councilmember
somebody's
Tier.
got one question.
Councilmember Winger.
Tia?
I just would like to say thank you for coming and presenting that for us and letting us know that you're going to be doing an open house. So I hope it's successful. I will
Monthly.
be on the road, so I won't make it to the open house,
Well,
but
it's a
thank you
monthly
for giving
thing,
that.
all year long, first Thursday.
First
is a
Thursday?
Monthly thing, yep.
All
It's
right.
been for years.
Thank you.
One thing that we are for sure going to have this year that we did last year for the first time, not last year, the year before, is the mural project, which will in the end involve at least a dozen artists painting on the probably Tyvek again covered walls, and that I won't go into that whole process, but that it will be up during November and half of December. That's a very, very dynamic, dramatic experience for those involved and for people to come and see a little bit how it's done and the results, certainly. Anyhow, so that's it for me. Any
See
other
Councilmember
questions,
Petty.
comments?
Yes, I had one question. I know in the past that you had put forth that little card that gave what was
Right.
happening. Can we expect to see that?
You will.
Okay,
You will
thank you.
indeed. You will indeed. In fact, I was feeling it not in my hand tonight, like we just, we had to shuffle a lot of shows around and say, it's too bad, so sad. We'll maybe see you next year. And we hope to. We hope to. We'll just see how that all shuffles out, who's available, who isn't, and so forth. Anyway, okay?
Councilmember Naxton.
Just one more thing.
Yes,
Just
sir.
wanted- You mentioned the Potter's Guild, and something just kind of came up, and that both of my daughters did pottery, and we were there. I'm not a potter, but they are. But now that they're in other places, they found that it's kind of almost a unique and pretty cool thing what they had here that is not very common other places.
Oh,
And
truly.
how much they appreciated it. And since you're here, and they were just relaying this to me recently, I thought I'd pass that on.
Well, I
That's
appreciate
something
that.
special we have here.
I have spent a lot of years in the pottery studio to myself in the past, and I dearly, dearly love it. But you either do pottery or you don't. There's no halfway. And so, anyway, that's another whole story. But it is wonderful. They've got some magnificent equipment in there that they have purchased themselves, and it is a unique little studio, that's for sure. They could easily fill up twice that space, and it wouldn't be crowded. It's pretty jammed in there, so they make use of every bit of it. They got a new electric kiln recently that's quite handsome. If you're into kilns, it's about this big. It's really wonderful. And then they just finished firing the gas kiln. Now too, they're making bowls for the food bank soup supper, which they do annually. Anyway, anything else? I'm happy to answer any other questions, comments.
Thank you, Marion. Look forward to the grand opening.
Okay.
Reopening.
Yeah, get your choice words ready.
Yeah. Okay. Is there anybody else that'd like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda? I'd like to recognize our former city council member, Miss Linda Swarner.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, Linda Swarner, Box 1792, Kenai. And yes, former council member, former vice mayor. One of the things, and this kind of involved the Art Guild too many years ago. I was driving down the street, something dear to my heart were the banners. And if you're old, you can't read the printing on the banners. True. And the colors are awful. They're not bright. I've looked at banners for the city many years ago. And we've helped the members of the Art Guild designed banners. We hung banners. We painted banners. They can be beautiful. But that light color of the banners, you can't read and they're not going to stick out. The pictures of the banners of the bears and the eagle, people are going to remember those. They're not going to remember that pale aqua, and I'm a teal person. So that's it. Okay. Also, I'm going to be Bob Peters. because well, yeah, but Bob always said something and I never voted for it. So the mayor has something in there about new chairs for members. I think you should have new chairs, but I think the constituent needs to have new chairs too. After all these years, you guys got new chairs just after I left the council, I think. Anyway, there needs to be new chairs in the budget. And then you look at, your number of people in Zoom. You don't have very many people there. The budget is being introduced. You don't have very many people out here either. Things haven't changed in that regard. I don't know why the residents of the city of Kenai who pay property taxes are not really involved with the budget. That's, you guys can figure that part out. Also, I will not be working on any more elections because I am moving to the big city. But I have worked several previous state and city and borough elections, and I just would like to say that I have never witnessed any irregularities. I've always appreciated people giving me their ID card with their picture because sometimes you don't remember the people that you live next door to. And so those ID pictures are so important. And sometimes there's fathers and sons that have the same name, and you have to go by the voter registration ID number if they have their ID cards, or else their driver's license. Anyway, it's been fun.
Any questions of Ms. Swarner? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you. No questions. I just want to, first off, thank you for all your service as a volunteer for voting, because you've greeted me many times over there voting and made sure I was who I said I was, which definitely appreciate, Linda. And also, I did have the privilege to serve with you 1 year. I think it was your last year of service, and I think you probably hold the record, for serving on the city council, even perhaps more than John Williams.
I do.
Yeah, I think it was like 21 years or something like that. So that's an incredible amount of service to the city of Kenai, and I really want to note that and recognize it for everybody. I do disagree with you on one thing. These are actually the same chairs you were sitting in. You know, we've never replaced them, and as I recall, you were down at the end.
Yeah, best chair.
Yeah,
Best
where
seat.
Councilmember
house.
Askin is now. You know, that 1 year I served with you. But anyway, again, really appreciate your service to Kenai. Sorry to miss you to the big city, but things change, you know, and I totally agree with you on our elections and how well they've been won. And I think that is a testament to the city clerks that we've had, including Carol Frias, who was our city clerk, you know, back when you and I were serving together. So thank you very much.
You're welcome. And just a point on I first did recounts on the old paper ballots that we had many years ago. And if they did not come out the right number of voters, I mean, you were there till 3 o'clock in the morning recounting. So, you know, yeah, it's just a lot of numbers.
That's amazing. Any other questions of Ms. Warner? So I think I saw our city manager jotting down some notes on the banners. So we'll see what, oh, Councilmember Petty.
Yes, I did want to thank you for bringing your thoughts about the lettering on the banners and the very demure colors that were chosen. I wholeheartedly agree. And I do also want to thank you for your service to the city.
Thank you. And I always look at the flowers too, so in between my travels back and forth, you may see me back if the flowers aren't looking good. Thank you.
Thank you, Linda. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item that is not on the agenda or consent agenda?
Members on Zoom can unmute or raise your hand.
Okay, seeing none, we'll move to public hearings. D1, ordinance number 3205-2021, authorizing a budget transfer in the general fund fire and non-departmental departments and increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the Public Safety Improvement Capital Project Fund to provide supplemental funding to the Fire Station Number 2 Station Alerting Project and the Dispatch Base Station Radio Replacement Project. Pleasure, Council. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move to enact ordinance 3205-2021.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3205-2021?
Anybody on Zoom can raise your hand or unmute yourself.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council, deliberation? Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, just a question. Is this a rework of a project or just something we noticed in the functionality test that needed to be addressed?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel, Councilmember Glendening. So this is the project that seems to never end. This is the station alerting for station number 2. We were trying to connect station 2 to station 1. While we were connecting 2 to 1, we lost operations in station 1 because of some old wiring. So this is additional appropriation for this project to bring that wiring up to date so that station 1 is fully functional. So essentially we lost some of station 1 functionality. As we were bringing station 2, this will get both stations up to full functionality.
Okay, thank you.
Any other comments, deliberation? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtet?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council, we're on item D2, ordinance number 3206-2021, accepting and appropriating private donations to the Kenai Animal Shelter for the care of animals. Pleasure, council. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3206-2021.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3206-2021?
Members on Zoom can unmute yourself or raise your hand.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from Council Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I just want to thank the individual donors for their donations to our animal shelter. Shannon Richards, Shara Tantia, Robert and Karen Honda, Angela Vermillion, James Carpenter, Peninsula Radiation Oncology, Lowell Frank, Shasta Brenner, Rita Draheim, Vian Mack, and 3 anonymous donors. Thank you.
Thank you for doing that. Appreciate it. Any further comments from Councilman Glendening?
Yeah, just note with interest the idea that there'll be a digital display of the animals, and then those will be able to shared with other city facilities, other cities or other facilities with the city. In other words, if there's an animal shelter in, say, another town, Homer or something, would we be able to project images there for their viewing? Or I guess I'm at a little loss on what this means.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening, actually, Mr. Ross can probably provide an answer for that.
Chief Ross.
Councilor Glendening through the mayor. So I'm not aware that it'll connect to other facilities. It will allow them to have a screen up at the animal shelter showing photos of the animals, and then the shelter staff will be able to bring animals up that people select off the screen. So they won't all be going back sticking their hands in the cages and stuff. They'll have animals brought out to them. So the same technology is used at the library and at the airport, so we know that we can potentially connect to those and display animals that are up for adoption at those facilities. I think at the visitor center too. So it requires this, JJ, the animal control chief, has worked with our IT person on this, so it requires a certain software technology. I'm not sure if there are other facilities where that'll work.
Well, that's interesting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief Ross. Any further discussion on ordinance number 3206-2021? See none. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council on item D3, ordinance number 3207-2021, increasing estimated revenues and appropriations in the general fund, police department, and accepting funds from both the Department of Justice and the Alaska Municipal League Joint Insurance Association for the purchase of ballistic vests. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
Move to enact ordinance 3207-2021.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3207-2021?
On Zoom, you can unmute or use the raise hand feature.
See no, bring it back to council. Councilmember Naxton.
Sorry.
Oh, thank you, Lina. Any comments, deliberation from council? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Glendening?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Councilman on item D4, ordinance number 3209-2021, accepting and appropriating a grant from Derek Kaufman Fund through the Alaska Community Foundation for the purchase of library materials. Pleasure, council. Councilmember Naxton.
I move to enact ordinance 3210-2021. 3209, sorry.
Yep.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that would like to speak to ordinance number 3209-2021?
On Zoom, you can unmute yourself or use the raise hand feature.
Bring it back to council. Comments from council? Guess I'd just at this time speak for council and just want to thank the Derek Kaufman Fund for this grant for the purchase of library materials. Any further discussion? Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Council on item D5, ordinance number 10-2021, amending Kenai Municipal Code Sections 23.25.020, pay, plan, and adoption, 23.55.020, compensation structure by grade for employees in the classified service, 23.55.050, hourly rates, removing the appended salary schedule from the city's code of ordinances to allow for adoption of the salary schedule through the ordinance adopting a budget for the following fiscal year or by resolution. Pleasure, council. Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to enact ordinance number 3210, 2021.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to ordinance number 3210-2021?
If you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself or use the raise hand feature.
Thank you. And this, if you recall from our late on council, this was a requested postponement by administration. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Sure. I would move to postpone ordinance number 3210, 2021 to the May 19, 2021 council meeting and for a second public hearing at that meeting.
Second. Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Any discussion on the postponement? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, ordinance number 3210-2021 is postponed to our May 19th meeting. Next up, D6, resolution number 2021-28, adopting the city's capital improvement plan for fiscal years 2022 through 2026. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you. I move to adopt resolution 2021-28.
I'll second that.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-28?
If you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself or use the raise hand feature.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council? Councilmember Naxton.
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Vice Mayor Malloy.
No objection. I just wanted to comment on it.
Okay, very well.
So, you know, what's being done here is adopting the city's capital improvement plan for 2022 through 2026, but it's not actually funding the plan. We have a ordinance coming up, part of our budget ordinance, that will fund the plan for 2022, and then also commit some funds that would be appropriated later for projects. The only project that I really had an issue with is one for 2023, not 2022. And by adopting the plan, it's like sort of like the comprehensive plan. It's a you know, like this is what we would like to do, but circumstances can change, so it's not written in stone until the budget year when it's actually funded. And the one that I do have a little bit of issue with is the one that's for the lights for you know, out at the golf course. You know, and in the plan it has funding sources, and the funding source for that is grants. So it's proposed that, you know, if we get grants, we'll do it. And so that's an example of where it might not actually happen. And the reason that I have an issue with it is because to me that's kind of like a wish more than like an absolute need. And I know that it came up through the Parks and Recreation Commission, and it was a recommendation of theirs. But if you look at our energy bills, you know, they're coming to totaling over $1 million a year already. You know, and so while I support the plan and it includes that, when it would come to that item specifically in the future, you know, I hope the council would consider that circumstance at the time and whether it actually wants to fund it for that year or push it down the road, which the council can do. And another example is of needs of the city that I just heard about was there was another washout, you know, on Bryson Avenue and we lost part of one of our storm drains. And so this is a bluff out across from where Wildwood is, and it washed out and roughly estimated $300,000 maybe to fix that. And so that's in part of a plan. It's part of the plan. It's already you know, in our capital improvement plan, and that's something that's definitely a need. So, anyway, I do support the plan. I don't object to adopting it, but those are just my comments relating to it.
Very well. Is there any other deliberation comes from council? Unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-28 is adopted. Next up, we have item D7, resolution number 2021-29, authorizing a budget transfer in the personal use fishery fund for the purchase of automatic external defibrillators with enclosures for the city's dock, North Beach and South Beach. Pleasure, Council Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Move to adopt resolution number 2021-29.
Second.
Is there anybody from the general public that'd like to speak to resolution number 2021-29?
Those of you on Zoom can use the raise hand feature or unmute yourselves.
Seeing none, we'll bring it back to council. Comments from council?
Request unanimous consent.
Thank you. Unanimous consent. Councilmember Glendenning.
Just a question. These AEDs are primarily for dip netting summer season. When the dock and the dip net is not in vogue, it talks about returning them to their normal place. Would that be in storage, or do we leave them out 365 days a year?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, it's my understanding that they would be placed into use 365 days a year. I'm not certain where those other locations would be when they're not at the personal use fishery, but the plan would to have them in an area somewhere in the city that they would be available for use all year.
Okay, and then they'd be powered up and ready to go, and someone would monitor them and all of that. Okay, that's a good idea.
Thank you. Yeah, I know we've had health emergencies in the past related to, cardiac arrest. So I like this idea that we are providing that for those fisheries. So unanimous consent was requested. Is there any objection? Seeing none, resolution number 2021-29 is adopted. Next up, we have item G5, ordinance number 3213-2021, increasing revenues and appropriations in the general airport, water and sewer, and senior citizens fund for the city employee COVID-19 resilience pay and authorizing payments to employees on a retroactive monthly basis. This was on our consent agenda, requested to be removed by Councilmember Naxted. Councilmember Naxted.
I have nothing to say yet.
Okay. We're not having a public hearing, are we? So it's just up for debate right now to move.
To be moved to introduce and set a public hearing for May 19th if anybody's going to make a motion.
Okay. Councilmember Winger.
I'd like to make a motion to move to introduce it on May 19th. Ordinance 3213, 2021.
Very good. Is there a second?
Mayor Gabriel, for clarification, we're introducing the ordinance tonight and setting it for public hearing on
Right.
May 19th.
So basically what we're doing is we're moving to introduce it.
Right.
Yes. So I guess you'd have to amend amend the motion.
If that's what it is, I can make the motion state that we're introducing it and setting public hearing for May 19th, if that's the intent.
And is it concurrence of the second? Very good. Okay, we have a motion on the floor to introduce ordinance number 32-13-2021 and then public hearing on May 19th. Any discussion on the motion to introduce? Councilmember Naxted.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I think we could all agree that we appreciate our employees in the city prior to COVID and during COVID, and we certainly will after. I know we can agree on that, and I think we can probably agree that how hard the administration also worked to keep all of the employees safe in our city, in the city hall or in other buildings, be it the shields, locked buildings, requiring masks, separation, and all of that. And it's worked well. And then there was also, time off in case somebody had a family member or had COVID themselves. And so essentially, in our city, and also all employees were paid during this entire time. Nobody lost their job or anything like that. So everybody's been kept whole. So really everybody in the city, we're all in the same boat. Just the employees did have life jackets. And I think that moving this forward is essentially it's a poor policy that will divide the city employees and the taxpayers in the city, that because we're all in the same boat, that they would get taxpayer money essentially, where they don't. And I think it would be divisive, and I will be not supporting to move this forward.
Actually, I was just thinking of this as the clerk handed me the note that we're not debating the ordinance. We're debating the whether it's going to be introduced, and I will allow some latitude there because I think it does warrant some clarification of why you would want to do that. But we're not going to debate the ordinance beyond, a general description of a purpose of why you'd want to either introduce it or not introduce it. Any other comments, questions from council? Councilmember Petty.
Since there can't be any discussion about my thought process, I would not be in favor of introducing this ordinance.
Any other discussion? Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So I understand your cautionary warning and Council Member Petty's and Nexted's comments about introduction. And, I sometimes feel like, in favor and other days not supportive. I guess all in all, it would be good to hear from, the public regarding it, which would be the opportunity at the next meeting. So there's that on the one hand, but then on the other, as Council Member Nexted pointed out, that could lead to some division among our existing employees. So that's about all I can say tonight. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments? Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I believe this ordinance deserves a full discussion and opportunity for testimony. So I will be in favor of introduction of this ordinance.
Okay. Councilmember Winger.
I would just like to say part of the reason why this was introduced on my behalf was from conversations with city employees and first responders. When they go to Fred Meyer's and they find out that Fred Meyer's or Safeway employees got some sort of COVID bonus or extra pay, and then to find out that they didn't receive anything. To some of the people, it is a little bit of a slap in the face that their grocery clerk could be getting a bonus and that the city did nothing for him. There was a lot of impact. As Mr. Nexted stated, there was a lot of additional stresses in that time, and I think they need to be recognized for the work that they provided in services, oftentimes being shorthanded due to COVID protocols. I appreciate all the services that they've done, and I think that this should go to a public hearing so that people can testify in support or not in support of this.
Thank you. Well, I guess I'll weigh in on this myself because I think it does warrant at least a general explanation of why you vote for why you do. And just briefly, I think I can count on one hand the number of ordinances or legislation we pulled off the council, since I've been on council, we pulled off the consent agenda to not introduce. I think there's a public process that's involved. I've actually seconded ordinances and resolution to move to the floor, even though I had no intention to vote for them for the sake of discussion. In all honesty, at first blush with this, I don't support it, but I think that it's okay to talk about it and have the discussion, and that way you can, at that time when we debate the ordinance, have a more thorough deep dive into the explanation of why you either support it or not support it. So with that, I'll close my comments and ask if anybody else has additional comments. And the motion was to introduce this ordinance, so it would basically essentially go back on the consent agenda, like it never was pulled from there, and then our public hearing would be May 19th.
You're going to vote on it, and that's going to introduce it and set it for the public hearing on April 19th.
Correct.
May 19th, yeah.
And
So it'll move forward like everything else would, that was on the
That
consent
was on the
agenda.
consent agenda, correct.
So,
Councilmember Glendening.
yeah, a yes vote then accomplishes the goal that you
A
said.
yes vote introduces the ordinance. So a yes vote essentially acts like it never came off the consent agenda. Okay. So everybody knows clear what we're voting on. Clerk, please call the roll.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty,
No?
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
No.
Councilmember Glendening,
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat.
No.
Motion passes.
Council, we're now on item G6, action approval, donation of $500 to Mountain View Elementary School to be used for purchasing bike helmets for their annual bike rodeo event. Councilmember Winger.
Yes, thank you. I've spoken a lot about the city's involvement with the Mountain Views Bike Rodeo. This is something that's been going on for quite a time now. Barb Ralston's been a long, outstanding teacher. I think she's got over 20 years in with Mountain View. And this is a program that she brought in with partnership with Safe Kids and the Kenai Police Department because she's had two separate students that were riding their bikes. One was the Bushnell boy. You'll see his sign mounted in memory of outside of IGA. He was hit on his bike and killed there. So she had lost two separate students to biking accidents. And it's simply because they're not taught to do.
Probably what we should do is make a motion to approve the $500 and just get it on the floor
Okay.
for discussion.
I'd like to make a motion for the $500 donation to Mountain Views Bike Rodeo.
Or second?
Second.
Very good, okay. Continue, Ms.
Thank you.
Winger.
So ultimately, she's lost two students, and she found that there was a need to teach kids how to use proper bike stops and hand signals. Many of the kids don't have any experience with riding bikes or doing so properly, yet parents allow them to go out in the community. Being able to provide helmets, Safe Kids does that for a $5 fee, which is relatively big discount from going to the store. That makes it affordable for some families, still unaffordable for others. So with this donation of $500, they're expecting a little over 100 students to participate in this. This would provide helmets for all the students. Anything additional that goes past that, I will be covering that expense out of my pocket to make sure that helmets are provided to all participants. By doing so, they would work on a logo, some sort to put on the back that says generally donated by the city of Kenai. So that way we can identify those kids when they're out and about that we provided that helmet. And it's just our goal to really partner more with the city of Kenai. They appreciate all that we do with donating our officers for the event, but this would just really help keep a lot of the youth a lot safer, and we would really appreciate the support of council on this.
Any further discussion? And just so you're aware, Councilman Winger, this could have actually gone through our mini grant steering committee. This is sort of one of those wheelhouse grants that could have gone through there if the school, just for future knowledge. Councilman Glendenning.
Yes, I see in the memo, there's a continued partnership with the Kenai Police Department, and from that I understand that perhaps they provide instruction and guidance for novice bike riders. Is that my understanding?
Chief, or is this? I guess we're just kind of talking about just the donation for the helmets.
Yeah, I'm just reading from the memo here about how this functions, and I'm going to vote for it. I just need some a little more background on it.
Well, I guess
if that's not appropriate, then I'll.
Well, I guess what I'm wondering is who's let's see. I mean, would Miss Winger, she's the one who brought this forward, is she the one that would be speaking to it? I guess, is that would your question be to her?
Yeah, my question is, students haven't ridden the bike, and it says the Kenai Police Department is involved, and I would just like to highlight any positive contribution that they would have in this endeavor. Thank you.
Yeah, and I think they've been involved for a number of years, if I'm not mistaken. Is that, yeah. Councilman Winger.
Yes, they've been a true key piece to this. It really, truly wouldn't go on without the partnership with our police department. They set up the course, they man it, they teach the kids to stop, and ultimately, sometimes some of these children have never rode a bike. So our officers, for the first time, are giving these children the experience of riding a bike, which they idolize. Our resource officer, Dan Smith, he has a great relationship with these students, almost like a fatherly experience. So there's definitely a bond and a need for the continued participation from the police department.
Okay. Did that sort of cover your question?
That hit the nail on the head, just for general information of actually about this program. Thank you, Mayor.
Okay. The reason I say is that I don't know if Chief Ross is personally familiar with what goes on at the rodeo. He's probably got other officers there, so I should say it's a rough idea. I think we all do, but it's not your cowboys and cattle rustling type of rodeo either. Councilman Axton.
Yeah, I believe I probably took my kids to that rodeo about 20 years ago when they went to that school, so familiar with it. I probably paid $5 or whatever the cost was for a helmet. I do remember doing that. Matter of fact, that was about when it became law to do that. And so I guess I've got some questions, and because normally for something like this, it's usually pretty easy for me, and it's easy for me normally because the organization that is requesting the funds would normally provide some kind of a memo saying, we need this much, we're this far short. Perhaps they would even care to come and speak to us. And but that hasn't happened. It hasn't happened in the last 20 years because the city hasn't made a donation to Mountain View. If it's Mountain View, I don't know if it's the Kenai Peninsula Borough or the school district or who gets the money and how much what are they going to do with excess funds, if there are excess funds. I mean, if I get a question from a constituent asking, well, you gave all this money, well, where did it go? I'm not sure who's doing the accounting on it. And so I feel a little uncomfortable not knowing that $500 is the number, that they, from an organization, that 100 kids are going to actually need helmets. And if they don't, I'm going to start talking in circles here. Just where does the money go? Maybe $100 is the appropriate amount, but I just don't know that without somebody here asking for it. And we have groups from schools that come, and maybe it's a hockey team or something like that, cheerleaders. They'll be here, and they have a specific goal and need, and they present it. And I always appreciate that, but without that information, and even who are writing the check to, I'm at the moment hesitant to approve this on my end.
Any further comments from council? Councilmember Winger?
Yes. Barb Ralston did have every intention of either trying to make it or send an email, but with distance learning still happening with some of her students, she's covering multiple grade levels. So that's kept her extremely busy. She is following this. And the check would be made out to Mountain View Elementary. It would go into an actual fund with the PTA. So it would be accounted as bike rodeo. The money and anything that would be unspent, I've already talked with the principal, anything that would be unspent would stay into that selected PTA account labeled bike rodeo. And helmets would be able to be purchased next year. So if we don't need the whole $500 for helmets, the money will sit there for helmets for next year. They do expect the money to be completely used, however.
Councilmember Raskin?
Would it be more appropriate to redirect that this be presented to the grant steering committee?
I'm guessing there's probably a time frame here that maybe Ms. Winger can speak to.
Yes, the bike rodeo is on May 12th, so it is coming up rather fast.
You know, I'm just spitballing here, but maybe a option would be to amend the motion to include invoiced receipts to the city up to $500. I'm just spitballing here. If there's a member that would care to make that motion. Councilmember Naxton.
Yeah, if I follow that, I would amend the motion regarding the bike helmets to require receipts of the sales of the helmets up to $500, and any funds left over would revert back to the city.
I'll second that.
Okay. Is there any discussion on the motion to amend to from $500 to actual invoice receipts up to $500? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Petty?
Yes.
Councilmember Winger?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning?
Yes.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes?
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. We now have an amended motion to provide funding for the bike rodeo for the purchase of helmets for invoice receipts up to a maximum of $500. Any further discussion? Councilmember Glendon.
Yeah, just a question. So when this event happens, you would have helmets on hand. Okay, those have to be accounted for. We're talking about X number of kids and projecting the need for this amount of helmets. How would the invoicing work?
Well, I'm guessing that the PTA who was handling this, the money, they would be the ones that would submit to our finance department.
So there's going to have to be a revolving fund, something up front to have the inventory, and then the inventory as it is distributed or placed in possession of a child, then that would trigger an accounting event. Is that correct?
Yes, as I imagine, that's what that would do. So I think they've got helmets there, presumably, and then they would, as those helmets are handed out at $5 per helmet, correct? Then we'd have a tally of the number of helmets handed out that invoice would be presented to our finance director up to $500, but for actual invoiced amount or the number of helmets distributed. And Terry, is that something that we can handle? All right, just covering all my bases here. Any other discussion, Councilmember Knox?
Yeah, will probably support this, but I'm still disappointed that there's nobody here or on Zoom. We're all busy, but it's $500. So I would be darn sure to have somebody here. But the other thing that this doesn't seem to address is where the money is coming from. Where should we pull it from?
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Please.
in the past, when you guys have made donations, when it's council making the donation, comes from the unidentified grants to other agencies from the legislative budget.
Legislative, yes. And do we have sufficient funds to cover those?
Yes.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So I'll be voting for this. I like the amended version, and I certainly wouldn't want to see a kiddo not get a helmet. So hopefully we get all the helmets covered. See no other discussion, clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmember Winger,
Yes.
Mayor Gabriel,
Yes.
Councilmember Askin,
Yes.
Councilmember Glendenning,
Yes.
Councilmember Knoxtat,
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy,
Yes.
Councilmember Petty.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you, Council. We're now on G7, action approval amending the employment agreements between the City of Kenai and the City Attorney. The City of Kenai and City Attorney, City Clerk, and City Manager. Let me reread that, just so it didn't sound right. Amending employment contracts between the City of Kenai and City Attorney, City Clerk, and City Manager. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I move to approve amending the employment agreements between the City of Kenai and City Attorney Scott Bloom, the City Clerk Jamie Hines, and the City Manager Paul Ostrander, with directions on compensation to be given to the HR Director.
Any discussion on the motion?
Request unanimous consent.
Unanimous consent was requested. Any objection? Seeing none, the amended employment agreements between our city, between the City of Kenai, City Attorney, City Clerk, and City Manager is approved. Next up, we have discussion replacement chairs for dais and executive session conference room. This was, it sort of has my name on it, but I think it was through discussion of, it's like I got thrown under the bus on this one. I'm not trying to figure out how that happened, but clearly there was some discussion among several council members, regarding the status of the chairs here. And is Vice Mayor Malloy, we've just for the general information for the public here, we've had kind of a quasi, nobody seems to know how old these chairs are. And our furthest benchmark at this point is Vice Mayor Malloy, who started serving in fall of '05. And they were here when he was here. So they're 16 years old and could be, for all we know, over 20 years old. But they're getting a little worn out. I know there's some of those ones you see, like the old bone pile there in the corner. I don't know what's going on with those, but I remember, at one point when I was actually sitting where Councilmember Raskin was and sitting next to me was Councilmember Bookie, we would always jump in, and there was one chair there that never seemed to feel right, so whoever got here first would jump in that one and flip the other one to the other guy. And so, personally, I find when we have long meetings, tonight maybe won't be quite so bad, but certainly budget work sessions and some of the other longer marathons we've had that, and maybe it's my fault for not taking breaks enough to move around, but I find that if I'm sitting here for 3 hours, 2.5 hours, 3 hours, my back's a little sore getting up and kind of stretching out. So I guess that's a sign of age. But anyway, I'll just pass around the dies. I know the clerk spent some time including some samples in our packet here, and just open up the discussion. Councilman Glendenning.
Yes, I would yield to the mayor to be the crash dummy or selector of.
I know you reached for it.
Okay, got it?
Yep.
Okay, I would be, how can we say, remiss in my observations of need for chairs. I don't have a deluxe chair here, but I have a big butt, so I guess that kind of balances out. But I would think that the mayor having experience up and down the row with chairs, he might be the ideal crash dummy to help pick us out a chair. I have no preference. I will be happy with what is brought forward.
Thank you. And just for clarification, the prices that are on here, Ms. Hines, do we get a break with or a discount for bulk order, or how does that work?
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I noted in the memo that that's list price, and our prices are at or below $500 for each of those chairs.
Okay. Very good. I just want to point that out for the folks who might have jumped on the pack. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Yeah, I definitely support having, the purchase of new chairs in the budget. That will be taken up soon. Yes, these are past their useful life. We've had a lot of meetings up to 5 hours this past year, and they don't really support your back well. I had the opportunity to be in the new conference room at the airport. It's fantastic. The conference room itself is fantastic. I mean, thanks to the FAA and to the project and the city for getting that done. And their chairs there are pretty nice. Really support your butt, Councilmember Glendenning, well, and your back pretty well. The only deficiency that Mayor Gabriel noted was maybe in the height of the back and being able to lean your head back. So, that might be something for consideration, but I think the money's be well spent. Thank you.
Councilmember Naxton.
I guess maybe I'm pain tolerant. I'm fine with the chairs. I might fall out of them because they are kind of wore out. I agree. But looking at a picture doesn't help me make a decision on a chair. I find myself looking at the dollars and not the chair because I can't sit in it. And I was wondering if perhaps a committee of two, like the mayor and vice mayor, could have an opportunity to sit in these and make a command decision on this one and this one, since Vice Mayor Malloy already tried out one that is a city chair that worked. But otherwise, I don't know what we'd be picking because they're black chairs or green or whatever, and the dollar amount. So somebody's going to have to try them out, I think.
Yeah, and on that note, I did note. I did note when I went through here that none of these had any reviews associated with them, so you couldn't really click on to see. But maybe there's something online that we could. I don't know. What do you think, Vice Mayor Malloy? You want to work on making an executive decision here?
Yeah, it could be a crash test dummy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sounds good. I guess Councilmember Petty.
I would like y'all to highly consider the lumbar support.
Yes.
So that would be mindful, top of mind when you're doing that. And if there was an availability for a USA-made chair, even if we had to spend a little bit extra, that would be my preference because I noticed that all of these were imports. So that's my observation.
Okay. Councilmember Weir?
Yes. I am not in support of this. I can't justify to my constituents or people that talk to me on why we would be spending $10,000 on chairs. I don't myself find them uncomfortable, but looking at a sticker price of $500 or less, that's not even something I would spend on a chair in my own home to sit here and justify spending it. So I wouldn't be in support of this.
Thank you. Any further discussion? So I guess we know we got one person against it. The remaining people that are for the chairs, are they okay with Councilmember, or Vice Mayor Malloy and I sort of doing the recon on them?
Yeah, I think if you guys do a recon, having spent a lot of time in control rooms, you want a chair that'll adjust for height, pitch, lumbar support, of course. Just the ability even to adjust a chair in mid-session perhaps could find some relief, just my comments. But you and the Vice Mayor, I think, would have a good view of a proper selection. Thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy?
Thank you, and I think that the mayor and I would have sufficient enough time to pull that off with the help of the city clerk, since, you know, it would be a budget item for next year, beginning in July, next
Right.
fiscal year, so.
Very good. Okay, thank you. Moving on, we have discussion COVID-19 response. Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We currently have no employees in COVID protocol. CPH, as of today, has 2 patients in the hospital with COVID. The senior center continues to reopen slowly, introducing new programs to get them back closer to normal. Every week they make progress towards that, so that's exciting. The COVID leave for employees is expiring tomorrow. As you know, that was initially instituted back in March, but that will be expiring tomorrow. And then the last thing I have is that Fire Chief Pryor wants to provide his testimony on why he chose to get the vaccine in a video that is a part of the Governor's Sleeves Up for Summer campaign. And I know when I had discussed a similar thing that was going to be initiated by the city in the past, there was some concerns with council. So I wanted to bring that up in case there continues to be concerns with that. That would be, he would be doing the video on Friday. I told him today that I was going to talk to council, and if council had concerns about him doing that he would have to back out. But I wanted to at least bring that up to council to see if there's reservations about him doing that. Just for your information, this is something that is a part of this Sleeves Up for Summer campaign. The governor's office through DHSS has produced probably 20 videos so far. Senator Murchicki did one of them. Just various people from all around the state have been doing these, and their focus has been on trying to get business owners and really a broad range of folks that would represent a lot of different segments of the society to do these videos. So that's what this is, and again, I just wanted to bring that up to council to see if there was concerns about him doing that.
Councilmember Petty.
I'm sorry, what was the theme of these videos, please?
The
Yes, Mr. Ostrander.
through the mayor, Councilmember Petty, the governor's campaign is called Sleeves Up for Summer.
Councilmember Warrior.
Yes, I would be, I'm still in opposition to that. If Tony would like to do that as Tony, not as a member or as the fire department, I say individual, you can do whatever you want, but as a representing the city, that could lead to trust issues with some members, and I just feel that the campaign should be best left neutral and that we're not involved. So I wouldn't support him doing anything in uniform or as a chief, but if he would like to do it as his own personal, then that's on him.
Councilmember Glendening.
Yes, Sleeves Up this summer, how many vaccines are there? Would we be endorsing a certain type or whatever's left on the menu? It suggests that we are endorsing a certain protocol, a certain experimental drug for application. If an individual wants to take the jab, that's fine, and there may be a way to explain that it's available. We've already appropriated money for a mobile ambulance or device to go around and offer injections. I believe that, in my mind, is sufficient to indicate our support for a voluntary acceptance of of this vaccines, or these vaccines? Thank you.
Well, as Mr. Ostrander said, this is something that was through the governor's office. I was involved with a couple of teleconferences regarding Kenai Peninsula folks, and a lot of that, as Mr. Ostrander pointed out, is aimed at businesses, trying to get businesses helping to encourage people to get vaccinated, to reopen and get back to what they say, back to normal. So to answer your question, there was no specific endorsement of any specific vaccine. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I don't have any objection to Chief Pryor participating in the governor's program.
Councilmember Naxton.
I don't have any objections either. As a matter of fact, Mr. Glendenning did bring up a good point that we did appropriate money for a mobile vaccine, and they will be in uniform. And matter of fact, when I got my vaccine, they were also in uniform when I sat there next to them, and it was a whole room full of men and women in uniform. So I don't see that any different, and if they choose to make a video, anybody in the city that wants to do that would be fine with me.
So,
Vice Mayor Malloy.
so it's my understanding from what the city manager said, and he can correct me if I misunderstood him, that Chief Pryor was going to basically say why he as an individual wanted to be vaccinated, which is not him as, in endorsing it for the city.
Councilmember Askin.
I think if he's doing this as his own personal representation, I think that's perfectly fine.
Oh, sorry, Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. To address Vice Mayor Malloy's comment, yes, it was just his personal testimony as to why he chose to get vaccinated is my understanding of what the video would be. And if you look at the other videos that are posted there, that's what they are, just people telling the story about why they chose to get vaccinated, what went into that decision-making process. This is going to be Tony's personal testimony as to why he chose to get vaccinated. However, he will be in his regular fire chief, clothes. So, but it will be his own personal testimony. I might suggest that since there seems to be some disagreement amongst council, maybe a motion could be made and you could vote on it, and then I would know for certain which direction we could go.
So we want to make a motion and then debate as we continue on. I guess, I don't have an objection. I think if his first line is that getting a vaccine is a personal choice, and this is, go from there. I would immediately be Councilmember Winger.
Yes, I'm going to go off of what you just said, Mayor Gabriel. If it's a personal choice, I support that. But if we're going to be in uniform or say Tony Pryor, Kenai Fire Chief, that's where I wouldn't be okay. That's a deal breaker for me. If he wants to be in his own clothes and represent himself, just Tony Pryor. But if he's going to be in uniform or put his title, I don't support that.
You propose to make a motion, Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yeah, I'll try to do that. So I would move to allow Chief Pryor to participate in the Governor Sleeves Up for Summer campaign by a video in which he states his personal reasons for being vaccinated, including a disclaimer that he's not speaking for the city of Kenai.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, discussion? So I'm guessing his uniform's gonna, would it say City of Kenai on it? I mean,
It does, unless he takes his emblems off.
right? So I'm trying to, because it's sort of, I mean, in my mind, it would be a mixed message where if he says that he's not supporting from the, or it's not an endorsement of this, or the city of Kenai's position. Councilmember next then.
Yeah, I think part of the chief's identity is that he is the chief of the fire department at the city of Kenai. That's why he is doing he's doing it personally, but that's part of his identity in our city. So it seems totally appropriate that he would be wearing the uniform that he wears daily.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I don't necessarily have an objection to having a representative of our police department. I mean, they're already providing mobile clinics. They've done a lot of outreach for the vaccine. We've offered, I mean, I think by offering free cab rides to folks to get vaccines, we've sort of put an endorsement on at some level there as a city. So, I mean, I think I would be comfortable with him wearing his Kenai uniform as long as he sort of says, like I said, the first line would be, I understand getting a vaccine is a personal choice, but then go on to explain why he would, why he took it. Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, your point's well taken, Mayor. The rides to vaccines are volunteer activities. In case someone says, yeah, I want the jab, okay? Or when we send our refurbished vehicle around to administer vaccines, it is people are volunteering to have the jab. There's a difference between that and a promotional video with someone in full uniform with the patches of the city of Kenai endorsing a particular action. I know it's a fine point, but I cannot support him appearing in uniform. Thank you.
Any, Councilmember Raskin.
I guess I'm conflicted on this because I, as an employee of Hillcorp, could sit here with my FR gear on and say, I support getting a shot. And if someone were to call Hillcorp, they would say, we're not defending her. That's her opinion. She may have had her gear on that day. I mean, it's not. So I'm having a little problem with, well, just because it's the chief of the fire chief, or if it's Joe Blow on the street, it's still their personal opinion, regardless of what they're wearing, I guess. And I'm not putting as much emphasis on having a uniform.
Vice Mayor Malloy.
Yeah, and so, when I'm saying include a disclaimer, that's just, him verbally saying that he's not, his personal testimony isn't an endorsement by the city of Kenai. It doesn't mean that he can't wear his uniform. That wasn't part of the motion. I just wanted to clarify that.
Thank you.
To me, I kind of agree with Councilmember Askin, thank you.
Councilmember next then.
I realize it's probably the third time on this, but I guess I'm not real clear if the concern is somebody, if we're trying to protect the city from ourselves, or we're concerned about people getting the vaccine because somebody of authority recommends it. And so if it happens to be the first one where it's a concern legally, then we have an attorney here. Is there a legal issue that we should be aware of in this discussion?
Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Councilmember Nexted and Mayor Gabriel. I don't have any legal concerns with Tony providing his personal opinion as to why he chose to get vaccinated.
Thank you.
And I don't think it changes that if he's in a uniform or not.
Very good. I'll support the motion just based on and reference my prior comments. Any further discussion? Seeing none, clerk, please call the roll.
Mayor Gabriel?
Yes.
Councilmember Askin?
Yes.
Councilmember Glendening?
No.
Councilmember Naxtat?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Malloy?
Yes.
Councilmember Petty?
No.
Councilmember Winger?
No.
Motion passes.
Thank you. So we've got some direction for the city manager regarding sort of roadmap for Chief Pryor when he gives his testimony. Any further discussion on COVID-19 response, Mr. Ostrander? Okay.
That's it.
Very good. That moves us to, I guess I'll open up to questions. Councilmember Glendening.
Yeah, just a question of what's burbling around down in Juneau. Was there was it a Bill 76 passed that gave the governor emergency authorities, and then he said, well, no, I don't need these, just certain things remain, like the ability to receive funds, et cetera, et cetera. We're coming up against a timeline at the end of this month for our emergency declaration. Do you think the authorities that the governor retained unto himself on behalf of the state pour over into our situation? In other words, the accommodations, the legislation that we've provided so far give you the authority to go forward past the May 31st timeline. But is there anything in the residue that needs to be addressed, or do we need to think about it more and talk about it next meeting?
Mr. Ostrander.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Councilmember Glendening, we talked about this internally actually earlier this week about how we need to make sure that before we come to that May 19th meeting, we need to determine whether or not there are any funds that are out there that we're potentially eligible for that we may lose eligibility for if we do not have an emergency declaration in place. I will tell you that preliminarily, I don't think there's any funds that are in danger of losing those if the emergency declaration goes away, but we will look at that and make sure we have that information for council at the next meeting.
Yeah. And then just to comment, if something is pending, you have the authority to do that for 5 days, and we could arrange for a special meeting if necessary. Does that answer any pending question, any contingencies?
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendening, I don't know with certainty yet, but we will make sure that we know by the next meeting.
Any other questions on Vice Mayor Malloy?
Sure, just to follow up on that, and you may not be able to answer this either right now, but you mentioned about the COVID leave expiration, and just if there's any impact of that or something that needs to be, considered, if there's still a need or not. So if you don't have data or information on that, maybe that's something that you could get back to us, May 19th or whatever.
Through the mayor, Vice Mayor Malloy, I don't quite understand the request. COVID leave is going away on Thursday. You're asking if there is a potential need for COVID leave beyond that?
Yes.
Okay, I can speak to that. COVID leave was going to remain on the books until the end of the emergency declaration. That's the way the executive order was written. So when the emergency declaration goes away, COVID leave would go away. Obviously, the emergency declaration doesn't end until the end of May. I made the decision to remove COVID leave simply because we've had vaccines readily available for almost 9 weeks now. And in addition to that, we've got return to work policies that are more favorable now through guidance from the state and CDC that allows our employees to get back to work more quickly if they are a close contact or even if they get COVID. So the need that we had originally to have COVID on the books which was really to protect the employees and to provide them that leave when they had to be out because of COVID protocol. That is there's far less of a need now than there was then. So I felt it was appropriate time to get rid of the COVID leave off the books completely.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions of the city manager on COVID-19 response? Seeing none, we'll move to commission and committee reports. Sorry, Council on Aging, please.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. There's no report this evening, but our next time together will be on May the 13th at 4:30 over at the Senior Center. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Councilmember Petty. Airport Commission.
Next Airport Commission meeting is May 13th, and I'm not sure who's running that meeting now that Mary's gone.
I think, yeah, because I don't think our airport manager comes on until the 17th.
You still have your airport hat somewhere. Good.
Question answered.
Like your planning and zoning.
Very good,
Okay.
thank you. Harbor Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. The Monday, May 10 meeting was canceled for lack of agenda items. The next meeting is June 7th.
Thank you. Parks and Recreation Commission.
Yes, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. We will be meeting tomorrow here in the chambers at 6 o'clock.
Thank you, Ms. Swinger. Planning and Zoning Commission.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Planning and Zoning met in chambers here on the 28th of April. There was a consideration of plat for TKC subdivision submitted by Sagasher Surveys. It was passed unanimously. There was a resolution for a subdivision plat submitted by Sagasher on behalf of Van Revocable Trust. That was passed unanimously. There was a public hearing, a resolution application for a conditional use permit for a daycare, described as Lot 1, Block L, Woodland Subdivision, Part 1. That was passed unanimously. And then finally, there was an application for a conditional use permit for a planned unit development for a property described as Tract A, Kenai Landing Cottages Subdivision, located on Bowpicker Lane. That was passed unanimously with a suggested amendment that was also well-received and passed unanimously. The next meeting is May 12th. That ends my report. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Glendening. Beautification Committee.
Our next meeting is May 11th at 6 p.m. here.
Okay, very good. Mini Grant Steering Commission, our committee have no report. Unreported the mayor, I have a few items here. So I was able to attend Mary Bonnarant's retirement last Wednesday, and it was kind of neat. They had, and I just wanted to do a shout out to Erica over there. I mean, she did a great job of organizing the whole event. It was a surprise, and so what they did is they had a kind of muster over there. I think it was a little about noon or so, and then they had a sort of airplane parade. So, probably a dozen airplanes, including the King Air that Canadian Aviation has. They were there too. So what they did is they did a kind of a parade in front of her office, and she got to come out and see that. They revved up their engines, then they took off and did a flyby. One of those guys was hanging by his propeller all the way down the runway, which was pretty cool. So, and then from there they took it over to the crash center, the emergency ops, and had a nice little get together over there. And so it was very nice, well attended. I think, yeah, Mary was, very, very much appreciative of all that done for her. So this afternoon I did attend the joint Kenai Sonata Chamber Luncheon, where Senator Murkowski was the guest speaker, and got to hear about some of the updates that are going on in Washington right now. After that meeting, we did have a 3:15 before she caught it. She was waiting for her flight. Administration and myself and Vice Mayor did get to meet with her to go over infrastructure. It was sort of all things infrastructure, and that being said, it was almost all things bluff erosion project, where we certainly, I think, tried to make a really good case to move that forward to the core process, and and then also the address maybe the city's cost share portion of that to make that feasible. But it was apparent, I'm talking to Senator Murkowski, that Mr. Ostrander and his team have been very diligent in plotting, moving this thing forward. She says every time she thinks of Kenai, she thinks of our bluff erosion project, and Scott Curtin was able to provide a video of the drainage failure that Mr. Vice Mayor Malloy was referring to, and it was pretty dramatic. It's a good indication of how dynamic things are on that bluff there, and the need to address it. So, very good meeting. It was nice to be able to spend some one-on-one time with the senator and her staff. So I want to wish everybody happy Cinco de Mayo today. And last but not least, remember Monday is Mother's Day, so make sure you remember that. Let's throw that reminder out. We can't forget our moms. And with that, we'll turn over to the administration reports, city manager.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. So I did send an email earlier this week to council mentioning the fact that the borough has submitted for a 5-year project that addresses spruce bark beetle on the peninsula, and appropriations they're looking from through the congressional delegation. So $35 million. There was a meeting today. I was unable to attend because it conflicted with a meeting that I had with Senator Murkowski at 10:30. But both Bob Frates and Chief Pryor attended, and they are looking for $35 million, and it will address both public and private properties and is intended to be utilized throughout the borough. So hopefully we'll get some traction on that. I know Senator Murkowski heard about it from multiple people while she was here, and she obviously saw it driving around our city, how devastating the spruce bark beetle infestation is. So hopefully we'll see some traction on that. And I also did mention to council, but I mentioned again, I've been working with her office as well about the possibility of some separate funding specifically for the city of Kenai. It may be that gets consumed by the larger borough grant, but we're looking both avenues to potentially get funding. I did meet with the senator today. I had 2 separate meetings with her, one at 10:30 this morning, which was organized by KPED and KPED employees, board members, and also city managers from Seward, Homer, Soldotna, and Kenai were there. It was a really good discussion. Most of the folks that were there talked about infrastructure, but since I knew we had another meeting at 3:15, I avoided that, and I just got to spend the whole time bragging about how the city of Kenai is the best city on the peninsula, so that was good. But the afternoon meeting with the senator was really productive, I think, and the videos did speak volumes. The one primary objective with the meeting with the senator was to make sure that she understood that this design project that we are beginning to start here probably in the next several weeks still needs federal funding. And even if that funding isn't received until later this year, it's going to allow the Corps to provide the necessary support for that effort. So she's fully aware of that now, and I think with her support and the support of the rest of our congressional delegation and also some key players at the Corps in DC, I think we have a really good chance of getting that funded. As far as the Shop Local program and the grocery program, Brittany is going to be providing a final closeout report for both of those at your next meeting, so on May 19th. They did find out that at the last weekend of the Shop Local program, they ran out of funds, so they were not able to provide all of the vouchers for everyone who submitted. Approximately $12,000 to $15,000 additional dollars would be needed to issue all of those vouchers. Based on the support of council of the original program, I was assuming that you would like to see some opportunity to provide that additional funding. I'll bring something forward for your consideration at the next meeting of May 19th. It'll be a resolution that would allocate the additional necessary funds for that. In talking to Mr. Eubank today about that, one of the things that we may want to consider along with that funding, since these folks would not be receiving their vouchers until the latter part of May and the vouchers expire at the end of May, we may want to get a commitment from those businesses that those late issued vouchers could be utilized through the month of June. So anyways, that will be coming forward to you for your consideration at the next meeting. I actually do not have an employee to highlight tonight. I'm thinking maybe I need to slow down because I'm going to run through all the employees if I don't. So I might do that to every other meeting, but there is no employee highlight tonight. As far as the Bluff project goes, HDR did submit their cost proposal yesterday. I was happy to know that it was within budgeted amounts, so we will continue to negotiate with them on the scope of work and hope to have them under contract here, hopefully prior to the next meeting, which would mean that you would have a resolution, potentially at the next meeting awarding the contract, or if not that, the first meeting of June. And that's all I have, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Yeah, and not to steal your thunder, but just to let Chief Ross know that Senator Murkowski was very appreciative of Officer Smith's support today and mentioned it as she was leaving. So we did get one. Councilmember Winger.
Yes, I have a question for Manager Ostrander. I actually have two. Slash piles, have we identified locations within the city for residents to be able to bring the slash? I've seen a lot of people moving branches and dropping them, not securing their loads down, going quite a distance through like Hay Beach. So have we identified a location for that yet?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger, we have not yet. There's been some discussions about the potential of providing a slash pile area out by Section 36, out by the soccer fields, but we have not identified one as of yet.
Okay. And then my next question is, as a city, we had problems with people dumping slash piles, so we went around into some known garbage dump areas, homeless camp areas, and we put no dumping signs. Kind of a running joke in our area is the city's been picking up sand and then dumping their sand into big piles in front of those no dumping signs. So question is, are they going to be picking back up these piles that they're leaving behind in the no dumping areas?
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Winger, I wasn't aware of that, but I can follow up and see what the plan is. I'm speculating that they will pick them up eventually, but I'll follow up.
Thank you.
Do you have locations that you can provide for Mr. Ostrander?
Yes, Fifth and Birch is our area that it's been kind of a laughing joke on that. So pretty much everything in the area, it's usually dumped over by the cemetery, but for whatever reason, one day they were putting it in the back of the dump truck, and then they quit putting it, and they just started dumping piles.
Of the sand or the slash?
Sand.
Okay, very good. Any other questions of Mr. Ostrander? Councilman Glendenning.
Yeah, we've had some discussion on the dog park, and like a fence in the entryway. Do we have a cost estimate for materials for fence and the gated entryway into the dog park? Do we have a number, or is that being developed? So we have some understanding of what we're looking at as we develop this asset for the city.
Mr. Ostrander.
Through the mayor, Councilmember Glendenning, I think there is a preliminary cost estimate, not one that the city has generated, but there is a preliminary cost estimate. I haven't put my eyes on it in a while, though.
Okay, I can visit with you in the next week or so, and we'll maybe increase my understanding of the project when we get through visiting.
Any other questions of the city manager? Seeing none, we'll go to city attorney, Mr. Bloom.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel and members of council. I don't have any comments, but I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions of the city attorney? Seeing none, thank you, Scott. We'll go to city clerk, Ms. Hines.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. Just a couple of things. We can see council chambers on Zoom now. I think I showed a couple of you before the meeting, but the IT manager was able to find a switcher, so it's the same camera. It's not a new camera. And it feeds both YouTube and Zoom. I need to notify you guys that any propositions that you want put on the ballot for 2021 need to be adopted by August 4th. And also let you know that I've reached out to KCHS and expect to hear soon on who has been selected to be our next student representative. And then with my Alaska Association of Municipal Clerks hat on, I'm watching a few bills in the legislature, and AAMC will be making comments on those, but if they seem like they continue to gain traction, I'll speak more about them in the future and shed light on them for you guys, and may ask you to take action on them. but, in the way that they would affect the city. But that is all I have. But I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions of the city clerk? Thank you, Ms. Hines. Next, we have additional public comment. Is there anybody from the general public that would like to address the council at this time on any item? Ms. Nelson?
Well, I've been thinking about this for some time, but then when I do see any of you council people, I don't think to bring it up. As a number of you know, I walk with my dog most every day for 1 to 3 hours in both towns. And friends of mine who also do the same thing, and longer and shorter periods of time, we talk about the sidewalks a lot, or the street, or the ice, or the gravel, or the this, or the that, and where you can walk and where you can't walk, and why not, and all that sort of stuff. But I have to say, as much as I love Kenai, the worst piece of sidewalk is by our schools, by the junior high, the middle school, and the high school. The new sidewalk, of course, is fine, but that old stuff doesn't even qualify. It's old paving crap that's in there. It's lumpy, it's got holes, it's dangerous to walk on, really. I just always walk on the street, whether it's clear or not in that area. It's something that should be on your list at some point. It's abominable. It's the worst in both towns without compare.
So you're talking about on Rogers Road?
Yes, in part, coming by the rink, it's terrible there. It's humped, it's got holes, and then I'm back on Lawton. Oh, that is the worst.
Or Lawton,
Absolutely the
rather,
worst.
yeah, that's what I was thinking, okay.
And part of, what is that, going in front of the middle school?
Tinker.
Okay, so some of that's new, but if I remember correctly, but it's, where it's bad, it's really bad. So take a look, go take a walk.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Nelson. Is there anybody else from the general public that would like to address the council at this time?
If you're on Zoom, you can unmute yourself.
Very good. That'll bring us to council comments. Councilmember Glendenning.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I too went to Mary Bondurant's retirement party, and a good time was had by all. I liked the parade of airplanes and just the idea that we're there with doors open, fresh air, and all getting together and wishing a valued employee a enjoyable retirement. And I attended the senators' meeting today over at the chamber, and I was informed and was able to take a reading on the situation, and I know that we all have certain aspects of legislation or policy that we're watching, and I think she touched on all of them. And I know our city management is well aware of things that pertain to us specifically, and I appreciate your comments about how you had a meeting with and followed through on the priorities for our city, and that you represented us very, very well. And looking forward to a good summer, and hopefully we'll have lots of events that will open up the enjoyment of the city to all of its citizens. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Winger.
Yes, thank you. So I had a few different things going on. I did introduce my children at the end of the budget meeting last week. They were very much excited for you guys to pay attention to their wrestling awards, so thank you. It definitely played into their egos. We just got back from the state wrestling tournament, and my daughter played first in the boys division, and my son placed second, so it was a great time. So upcoming events here, I just wanted to mention we have the Kenai Peninsula Building Association Spring Show this weekend, and that's Saturday and Sunday from 10 to 5. We also have the Kenai Chambers hosting a trash cleanup, and that starts at 10 a.m. on Saturday at the chamber. You can go get some coffee, get some trash bags, go pick up the city, and they'll be doing a hot dog feed from noon to 1 at the chamber. So I would like to really encourage everybody. As you can tell, there's a lot of garbage around our city. Mountain View's bike rodeo will be May 12th. If anybody would like to get in contact with the school, I'm sure they would allow council to come and watch the rodeo, kind of see what it's about and participate with that. The Kenai Chamber has their Monte Carlo Casino Night coming up on May 22nd, so get your tickets purchased for that. The Parks and Recs Department's going to be doing the Kenai Kite Festival. That's May 29th at 10 a.m. The Name the Dog Park, they are doing that, and the names need to be submitted here by May 15th. There is definitely a need for the dog parks. I don't know about any of my fellow council members, but I've received a lot of phone calls about animal waste in the kids' parks this last week as people are getting outside with their families more. There are a lot of dogs that do their business in the kids' area of parks, so that definitely shows that there is a need for a designated dog area. I just want to note that the bears are coming out. People need to get out, clean up their properties, look around. There's a brown bear being spotted all over around Sterling. I seen 2 bears coming back from Big Lake, so they definitely are out. They are circulating. We've got to be bear aware and safe as we're out exploring these trails. They are hungry. And then I would just like to note that I would really like to invite the carnival into Kenai and get some functions going. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Askin.
I'm encouraged to hear there might be some spark beetle money maybe becoming available. One of our neighbors just down the street has taken every tree out of his yard. It's kind of sad. It looks really bare there, and there's a lot more that need to go. I really like the idea of the AEDs going in at the north and south shore. The cynical side of me is afraid that sometime this winter they'll probably get vandalized. I hope they don't. I had a coworker who works on one of the platforms had a heart attack just 2 weeks ago, and the helicopters were weathered in, and the AED kept him alive until they got to him. And he just got out of the hospital, so they do work. I too attended Mary's retirement. I got to get up close with a Piper Cub, which brought back lots of great memories, and it was an awesome performance that they did. Happy Mother's Day Sunday to all the mothers, and enjoy the summer.
Thank you. Councilmember Petty.
I have no comments, thank you.
Thank you. Vice Mayor Malloy.
Thank you, Mayor Gabriel. I also attended the chamber luncheon with Senator Murkowski and was really pleased to hear her say that the City of Kenai's message about the bluff erosion project has been received, and she was really positive about that. You know, and I appreciate City Manager and the Mayor and Mr. Curtin and Mr. Eubank setting up another meeting with her to talk about problems the city's having with, you know, the actual funding part of it, and her being very much supportive about doing what she can do to help the city facilitate that with the Corps of Engineers. So that was really good. You know, the last 2 weeks I've probably been out maybe 3 times and noted a lot of people out enjoying what infrastructure we do have for wildlife viewing. You know, we have 2 main ones, which is the Tarbox platform out on Boat Launch Road, and then the other unnamed platform along Bridge Access Road. And every time I was out, there was a lot of people at both of them because we had several hundred snow geese this year, which is better than the last few years. Last few years there were hardly any. And when I was out last evening over at the pond, we have a pond that develops every spring that's over at Sea Catch and Cannery Road before you get into the plant. And there was still some snow geese there, but there was also like a lot of sandhill cranes this year. I mean, maybe 1,000. And there was hundreds of white-fronted geese, a lot of Canadian geese, some brants. There was pintails, a lot of pintails, American widgeons, green-winged teals, mallards, you know, a lot of ducks too. Very little shorebirds yet. Just last evening I saw some dowitchers. They were the first ones that were there, and they were out by the little ponds that are on the boat launch road, you know, by the tar box platform. I just call it the tar box now because it's easier than saying 4 words. And there was people out there again, you know, watching the dowitchers. I'm going to be unable to participate in the cleanup on Saturday because I'm unfortunately going to be down in Homer for the Showbird Festival, where they do a great job of that every year. I think Assembly Member Dunn runs a boat that takes a group over to the other side of the bay, and there's also you know, like a hike to the Gray Wink below the glacier there and everything. So I'm going to go over there with Assembly Member Dunn, I hope. Anyway, appreciate again hearing this evening from Mr. Torkelson about the redistricting. That's going to be an interesting process. So that's all I got tonight.
Thank you. Councilmember Naxton.
Thank you, Mayor. I guess I missed most everything that everybody's been doing since our work session. About an hour after that, I headed to Anchorage, and the first time since February of last year, well, during the COVID, I actually made a trip outside. So it was just what I observed, and it's just my observation. And I was in 3 states. I traveled about just under 2,000 miles, frankly, Washington State, quite a bit in Oregon, and Northern California. So three very different states, and well, had a great time. But the reality down there is a lot different than here as far as the COVID, it seems, and that a lot of places are closed due to COVID. Or in Oregon, while I was there, most of the time restaurants were at somewhere around 50%. I think Thursday last week, while I was still there, the governor closed all the restaurants and bars and whatnot. And the talk was that in Washington State that might have happened on Tuesday this week, but I think I heard that maybe today, I'm not sure what happened today, but that Washington was going to do the same. I'm not sure about California, but everywhere I went, though, lots of small towns and several large cities, is you do not go into any restaurant, business, or whatever. Masks are absolutely mandatory. It's a whole lot different than our Alaska reality here, except for perhaps in Anchorage. But it was a kind of a stark contrast for what I've been used to here. But seems like things must be getting worse in those areas for them to be tightening down even more right now. So anyway, just my observation of what's going on there, and wanted to pass that on. So I'm not sure what may happen here in the future. Hopefully we'll be immune.
Thank you, Councilmember Naxted. We do not have an executive session, nor do we have any pending items. Seeing no other business before this body, we are adjourned.